On June 6, 2023, Kristel Candelario left her 16-month-old daughter alone and unattended at her residence in Cleveland, Ohio, while she went on vacation to Detroit and Puerto Rico. On the first day of her trip, she drove to Detroit, where she stayed with a man for a few days. She then took a Spirit Airlines flight to Puerto Rico on June 8, returned on June 11, and stayed in Michigan with a second man until she returned home on June 16. When she returned 10 days later, Kristel found Jailyn unresponsive in her playpen and called 911. Let's get into it. Candelario, a former substitute teacher, was captured by a Ring doorbell camera at a neighbor's that showed her loading a suitcase into her car and driving off on June 6, 2023. Kristel's car was seen on video returning to her home at 7:36 a.m. on June 16th. 11 minutes later, she made a frantic call to 911.
Police dispatcher protocol, police fire EMS. Police fire EMS. What's the address? What's the address? 3129 West 97. 3129 West 97. Hello? Okay, I can't help you if I don't know where you're at, so tell me the address so we can help you. 3129 West 97. Okay, is it a single or an apartment? Please. What's your name? Kristel. What's your last name, Kristel? Kristel Candelario, please help me. And what's your number in case you get what's your disconnected. 507-882. Tell me what's going on. What's going on?
Jailyn was found lying in her pack and play, covered in urine and feces. Candelario had dressed Jailyn in a clean outfit before emergency responders arrived, but the change of clothes did not hide the horrors Jailyn had gone through. Jailyn was alone in her playpen for 10 days with a few bottles of milk. Her cries echoed through the quiet streets of Cleveland in the dead of the night. She whimpered and howled, but no one came to her rescue. A neighbor's doorbell camera captured the 16-month-old's frequent screams, including one around 1 a.m., 2 days after her mother left. Jailyn died of starvation and severe dehydration. She had sunken eyes, dry lips, and fecal matter caked on her hands, under her fingernails, on the bottoms of her feet, and on her teeth, a sign that she had tried to eat her own feces to survive. She showed symptoms of severe dehydration, which caused her kidneys to also fail. Baby Jailyn weighed only 13 pounds, 7 pounds less than her last doctor's visit 2 months earlier. Based on the state of Jailyn's body, she had likely died 2 or 3 days before her body was discovered, meaning she survived in her playpen alone for nearly a week. Jailyn died a long and agonizing death, afraid and alone, while her mother enjoyed the beach and sunshine. Kristel told Cleveland homicide detectives in an interview in her living room about 2 hours after she returned home that she had been home all week and that Jailyn vomited and had little appetite for a few days. She spoke calmly as she said she woke up that morning and found Jailyn non-responsive. As she spoke to the police, Jailyn's body lay beneath a bedsheet on the floor next to her feet. Candelario, who didn't appear upset or emotional over her daughter's death, made it seem as if she had been home with her daughter the whole time, saying that Jailyn didn't want to eat for 2 days. Kristel then went on to claim Jailyn was crying out loud and screaming the previous night, telling police she thought her daughter was possibly in pain, despite her not actually being back home yet. After the shocking autopsy ruling over her daughter's condition, Candelario was indicted on charges of aggravated murder, 2 counts of murder, felonious assaults, and endangering children. A neighbor said this wasn't the first time Kristel left Jailyn home alone. She lived in the home with her daughters and her parents. According to neighbors, her parents recently went on vacation and took Kristel's older daughter with them. We kept telling her not to leave her by herself, not just me, my friend across the street, said one neighbor. Candelario had asked them to watch her baby before. When they agreed to watch her for a weekend, they claimed Candelario had disappeared for weeks. Meanwhile, Kristel never reached out to check on Jailyn to ensure that she had what she needed. Neighbors stated that they had to be the ones to get in contact with her to beg her to send money because Jailyn needed milk. Jailyn ended up being with the neighbor for over a month. She spent so much time with the neighbors that she even began calling them mama. There were so many people here, she could have knocked on any of our doors and asked us to take Jailyn, said another neighbor. Dr. Elizabeth Mooney, the deputy county medical examiner, called Jailyn's death one of the most tragic and unfortunate cases she has had in her career thus far. She said the pain and suffering she endured lasted not only hours, not days, but possibly a week.
My name is Dr. Elizabeth Mooney, and it's spelled Mooney. I am currently employed by Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office as a forensic pathologist and deputy medical examiner. In this capacity, I was assigned the task of performing an autopsy on little girl Jailyn Candelario in order to determine her cause and manner of death. Unfortunately, this is one of the most tragic and unfortunate cases I've had in my career thus far. So today I speak on behalf of her and her findings with the course of my examination. We received Jailyn at the medical examiner's office from the scene of her residence, at which time she was clothed in non-soiled clothing, indicating her body had likely been dressed prior to first responders' arrival, as they had mentioned before. So at autopsy, I examined the body of a very emaciated female toddler. At this point, she weighed 13 pounds. Upon review of medical records, this indicated approximately a 7-pound weight loss since her previous doctor's visit less than 2 months prior to that. The eyes were sunken and she had temporal wasting in her face. In addition to that, the skin showed markedly decreased turgor, meaning when I pinch the skin, it remains in that tented position, indicating severe dehydration. In addition, there was abundant fecal material present, caked on the fingers, the fingernails, the hands, the feet, as well as the soles of the feet. The same material was found on her lips, which were very dry and flaking, as well as in her oral cavity, caked to her teeth. She did have some diaper rash apparent, as well as fecal material adherent to those areas. Of note, the body was essentially free of significant injury, with the exception of dried excoriations or scratches to the face region predominantly, and whether or not these were inflicted to herself in a conscious or semi-conscious state while she was dying, I'm unable to determine that. Very early decompositional changes were present. This included faint discoloration or green discoloration of the abdomen. These are typically changes that we see within 2 to 3 days following death. No additional changes to suggest that she passed away prior to this were found externally or internally. Upon internal examination, I continued to find evidence consistent with starvation and dehydration. These included pale discoloration of the musculature, which was minimal. There was a decrease in intra-abdominal fat to the point of transparency as her body tried to feed upon itself for nutrients. Her stomach contents consisted of less than 2 milliliters of brown mucoid material. This is about equivalent to the distal part of my thumb, a very small amount. The rest of her bowel just contained patchy fecal material, but very minimal throughout. Her organs, including her liver, kidneys, and thymic gland, showed evidence of stress, specifically microscopically on exam. I found no additional evidence of significant natural disease going on or congenital abnormalities. Following my exam, I submitted body fluids for additional toxicology and chemistry testing, which further confirmed my gross findings that she had passed in a state of severe dehydration. Her kidneys had failed, and she was in a state of ketoacidosis, which leads to coma and eventually death. As such, I determined the cause of death to be just that, starvation and severe dehydration due to pediatric neglect. To come to the exact wording of the cause of death was based on my findings, but also the medical definitions, which I'd like to reiterate here. Dehydration, and specifically starvation, is a lengthy and continuous deprivation of food as to cause suffering or death. Pediatric neglect is the failure of a caregiver to meet adequately a child's basic needs, including physical safety, protection, food, clothing, shelter, education, medical or dental care, and supervision. In other words, neglect for Jailyn's basic needs from a caregiver resulted in her death. As such, I ruled this manner to be homicide. Most homicide deaths involve acts of violence inflicted from one person onto another, but this case involves a failure to act appropriately to support another who is dependent on them, falling into a homicidal manner. In the absence of more advanced decompositional changes, I believe that the pain and suffering she endured lasted not only hours, not days, but possibly even a week. This is a pain that comes from an extreme thirst and hunger. It also stems from an inherent terror of isolation or the lack of someone present to provide that. My knowledge on the depth of this suffering may not be as extensive as a medical or a mental health professional, but as a physician with psychiatric and pediatric training, I feel comfortable stating that the deprivation of food coupled with physical isolation and caregiver abandonment would be terrifying. We know that babies and children cry when they're hungry because it's unsettling and it's uncomfortable. That's almost immediately after birth. We also know that children as early as age 4 to 5 months experience separation anxiety, with the most extreme anxiety around 9 to 18 months. Jailyn was 16 months old. This feeling of abandonment for days on end, coupled with the pain of starvation and extreme thirst, is a type of suffering I don't think any of us could ever fully fathom. So, as a forensic pathologist, it is said that we are the voice of the dead and given the responsibility to speak for those who can't. So this morning, I'm honored to maintain that mission. Thank you.
During the trial, the defense presented Candelario's anxiety and depression to make sense of the case. Candelario was treated for depression in February of 2003 after she showed up to Hillcrest Hospital completely numb on one side of her body. Doctors initially believed she may have had a stroke, but they determined it to be a side effect triggered by anxiety and stress. Candelario had stopped taking her medication when she ran out in the weeks before her trip, changing her condition and possibly contributing to her decision making.
What we're about to tell you is mitigation. Just to kind of give you an understanding of who this person is. So she came over from Ecuador 2016 with her grandmother. She was here for a few years. Her parents came over and they lived together. She had her first daughter, Amaya, while she was married. She subsequently got divorced, was a single mom raising Amaya. Met the father of Jailyn in Ecuador. They had a relationship that unfortunately turned violent. While she was pregnant with Jailyn, he became physical with her. She came back to Cleveland and never to see him again, gave birth to Jailyn. He was never involved in Jailyn's life. She had 2 daughters on her with the help of her parents. She was struggling emotionally, physically, trying to work, support these children. Fast forward to 2023. It's just overwhelming. She even tried to harm herself. Took 20 Motrin, ended up in Metro. In early February of 23, after spending just a few days in her room alone, her mother went to check on her, asked her what was going on. Her whole side of her body was numb. Didn't know what was going on. They took her to Hillcrest Hospital. She was admitted there, and they were doing some evaluations for her migraine. She was complaining about headaches and weakness, facial drooping, thought it was possible stroke. They put her on IV Depakote, which is an anti-seizure, also used to treat manic disorder. And at the end of the day, after evaluations, she was clean, nothing wrong with her brain. They gave her oral Depakote and Effexor, 2 antidepressants, and sent her home. She was not very clear on what those were, but she was taking them supposedly as directed. And then she returned to Hillcrest Hospital again in March, and there was a note from the doctor saying that she should have had plenty of Effexor, but she's saying that she's out and she needs more, and she's coming back with these same problems. So they had her evaluated again, and they were saying that her anxiety and her stress was the trigger for these physical manifestations to what was happening to her, for the loss of sensation in the side of her body, the numbness. And they prescribed her more Depakote, more Effexor, and also Atarax to help her sleep because she wasn't sleeping. And this is in March of 2023. And, take the medications as prescribed. And then medications ran out. She wasn't feeling any better. They weren't working. She stopped. You're not supposed to do that with these drugs, Your Honor. These are very serious mental health drugs. And you need to be tapered off of these medications, or there could be some side effects. Not only the side effects, but the actual underlying conditions that she may have had or been suffering from are also going unmedicated at this time. And then we get into her trip. And I'm not going through that again. That's the worst thing I've ever heard. And I commend the prosecution and the detectives for their work. It was unimaginable, terrible, and I feel for all you guys having to deal with that too, and her family as well. It's when the prosecution showed pictures of her on her trip. Pictures can be deceiving. Personally, for having myself suffer from depression and anxiety, you can't tell what a person is going through from a picture, what they're dealing with on the inside. And I'm thankful for the support that I had from my family, my friends, my doctors. She didn't have any of that. She was hiding it from herself, from her parents. Nobody knew what she was suffering from. Her doctors even thought it was migraines and possible strokes. And to be honest with you, when I first met her, Your Honor, after this happened in June, I met a person that was devoid of emotion. Just when after hearing what had happened on the news, and then I get the call, she wants to meet with me, and I go talk to her, it was not what I expected. She had no emotion. She couldn't explain anything. I had no idea who I was talking to. But I'll tell you right now, this is not the same person. This person now is compliant on her medications. She's been taking them through the prison throughout the whole time that she's been in here. You know, again, there's no justification for her actions when she was out there, what she was doing. She could have called somebody, she could have done that, yes, but when you're in that state, when you're off medication, mismanaging your thoughts, you're not thinking clearly, her body she had to get out, and she was having fun. If she was okay, in her mind, Jailyn was okay. Of course that's not the case, but I will point to when she did finally get home, and we heard that 911 call, she didn't want this to happen. You could hear that. Screaming, help me, my daughter's dying. Yes, because of your actions, because of what your choices were. And you took responsibility for that, but that call, that one tiny breach from whatever was going on in her head, that reality that her daughter was dying, she was calling for help, she didn't want that. And again, Your Honor, she took responsibility. She pled to aggravated murder. She pled to child endangering. Nothing's going to bring Jailyn back. She knows that. So then, yeah, after the fact, in her state, she was telling detectives whatever. She thought she had another daughter. She had a Maya she had to think about. She had her parents. And then the prosecution saying that nobody's here on behalf of Jailyn. That's wrong. Her parents are here. They love that girl. They love Jailyn. Her mother loved Jailyn. She didn't deserve what happened to her. Nobody does.
But the prosecutor reminded the court that Candelario had the mindset to change Jailyn's clothes and concoct a cover story to police after she discovered her daughter's lifeless body when she returned from her trip. She also cited recordings of phone calls Candelario made from jail in November and January in which she recalled how much fun her trip to Puerto Rico was.
I'm going to hear that Ms. Candelario was depressed. And no one more than I appreciate mental health and mental health issues and the programs that this court and my office have tried to implement to help folks with mental health. This is not the case here. This is not the case at all. Her actions speak louder than words. She had the wherewithal to leave Cuyahoga County and drive to Detroit, to be not with one man, but with two, let alone leaving a child, her own flesh and blood, in a pack and play. And during the time that she has been locked up, she has been making plans for the future, talking to other folks at other jails, other prisons. She had a conversation, which I find more disturbing than not, but on November 26, 2023, instead of wrought with emotion, wrought with guilt, crying about the death of her child, she's talking with a friend about her trip to Puerto Rico and what a blast it was and how much the car cost, and they got a truck versus a car even though it was more expensive, and they were concerned about the other woman that was on the trip because she liked to spend money, and they spent money on food. There was never mention about her daughter in her phone calls, and in fact, on January 6th of 2024, she's talking to her mother, who she repeatedly talks to, and they talk about God is forgiving, God is this. You also have to take responsibility for your actions, and God isn't in the courtroom. That's why we have judges, and that's why we have the law, because we have to follow the law. But this is what she says, because, you know, she wants to make us believe that she doesn't understand the English language. She goes on to say, there are people who have gone free here, killing people. I mean, imagine. I mean, intentionally, and mine was practically an accident. I mean, because it was not like I did it intentionally. It's not like I picked up a gun or a bat or the girl bled or something like that. That's it. It was practically the same thing that happened to me a few days prior. I had had the same thing happen to me days prior. And I mean that day that it happened, that same situation happened. Were you starved when you were in Puerto Rico, Miss Candelario? Did you not have a glass of water to drink when your mouth was parched? It is really pretty pathetic, Your Honor. Because, you know, we always stand before you and say that the purposes and principles of sentencing are to punish the offender and to protect the public. And, you know, in the sentencing memorandum, the defense says, well, she's not going to do it again. Well, no, she's not going to do it again because she's going to prison. But it's the fact that she did it in the beginning that sticks with us. You don't do that. She was a mother. She got a title that means something in this world. Animals take care of their infants better. The thought of this child dying every day while she's having fun, humanity can't stomach that. And those are the actions that need to be punished. She abandoned her daughter and left her for dead. So, yeah, she didn't see blood. She didn't see the aftermath of a baseball bat. But what she did see were her eyes open, looking at her, saying, "Why did you do this to me?"
Prosecutors also showed travel receipts and pointed to photos on both her Facebook page and phone to indicate she was having a good time with friends and that there is no care in the world about a 16-month-old that was left alone in a pack and play. Her attorney argued the pictures didn't show their entire story, claiming she was hiding depression. The judge, however, wasn't buying it and sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Candelario's attorney said they are aiming for the court to take her mental state into account in a future appeal of her case. When asked how it is possible for a mother to abandon a 16-month-old baby in a house unattended for 10 days to go on vacation, Candelario said, "The answer is a bit difficult for the rest of the world to understand." When asked about the reasons for her trip to Detroit and Puerto Rico that resulted in her leaving her daughter alone, Candelario said, "It was a decision that was actually made many months before." During the trip, Candelario said she thought about her daughter and the fact that she was alone. Candelario said her boyfriend asked her about Jailyn one day during the trip. When he mentioned Jailyn to me, it was like when someone reminds you of someone who's not with you at the moment. But she said that she simply responded that her daughter was fine. She confessed that for a few seconds she thought about calling a family member or neighbor to check on her daughter's well-being. Candelario said her parents never knew that she had gone on a trip and had abandoned the little girl to her fate. "They never knew that I had gone to Puerto Rico," she said. "They thought I was at home or that I was with Jailyn, maybe somewhere else in another city. The only thing I told them was, go at ease, I'm going to stay here with Jailyn." When sentencing her, Common Pleas Judge Brendan Shannon summarized the tragedy and Candelario's behavior as a mother with one sentence, telling her she committed the ultimate act of betrayal by leaving her baby terrified and alone. The bond between a mother and a child is one of the purest and most sacred bonds. It is a relationship built on love, trust, and unwavering protection, the judge stated. That little baby died waiting for someone to save her. And you could have done that with a simple phone call. Instead, I see photos of you on a beach while your child was eating on her own feces to survive. His final words before he sentenced her to life without the possibility of parole. Just as you didn't let Jailyn out of her confinement until she died, so too you should spend the rest of your life in a cell without freedom. The only difference is that prison would at least feed you. At the sentencing, lead detective T.J. Powell said Jailyn will never be forgotten. His voice quivered as he read a poem he wrote in her memory.
J is for the justice that'll be received today. A is for the angel wings she earned on that joyful day. I is for the incremental repetition build-up of suspense for an innocent bystander's death that clearly makes no sense. L is for the lack of love while alone for 11 days. Y is for a young life that was taken away. N is for new eternal life Jailyn gained on that day. No child should ever have to die this way. Jailyn's life truly mattered. Unfortunately, she died trying to survive off of her own urine and fecal matter.
What in her mind made her think that she was going to play this out and come home and her baby would still be alive? Someone please explain to me how she thought this 16-month-old could fend for herself for 10 days. And when I heard her crying from a neighbor's Ring camera, it broke my heart. Now, if she knew she was suffering with depression and anxiety, why would she stop taking her meds? Now, this has happened. She wants to use the mental issue as an excuse. Well, personally, she's full of it to me. She was aware of what she was doing. She always would leave the baby with a neighbor. So why this time she chose not to leave her with a neighbor? She was gone for 10 days and it didn't even seem like she was in a hurry to get home, even after she said that she thought about Jailyn being home alone. She didn't care about this baby, and her actions to me was a way to get rid of her. Isn't it funny how she left for her trip after her parents and returned before them? She wanted to take this trip. It was not just an all of a sudden thing as she claimed. She knew that if she took Jailyn, she would be in the way of her having the trip she wanted to have with her boyfriend. She showed no emotions of her daughter's death, but she for sure put on a show when she called 911 and she made her statement in court. Her mother took her oldest daughter on the trip. I'm not sure why she didn't take the baby also. However, I am sure now that this has happened, she wished she probably would have taken her too. Alright guys, that is it for me. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. Please do me a favor and hit that like button for me. And if you have not already done so, don't forget to subscribe. Alright guys, until next time, take care of you.